Coming up in today's video, we will take a look at how I paint my 12mm World War II British armour. These miniatures can be somewhat daunting to paint due to their small size, but trust me when I say it can be easily accomplished. All you need is a bit of patience, a decent paintbrush and a steady hand. This guide can be used on any scale British vehicle as the paints are the same paints used on my bigger scale models. Be sure to leave me a comment below on how you found this video. Now, if you're interested in these 12mm miniatures, you'll be able to find them on the Victrix Limited page. These Lloyd carriers are not up for sale just yet, but they will be soon. If you want to see these miniatures in more detail, be sure to check out the review I did on them recently. Thanks again to Steve over at Victrix for providing me with these miniatures. Okay guys, so let's paint this 12mm Lloyd carrier from Victrix Limited. So we use a surface primer light grey from Tamiya, and then we give it a base coat of NATO Green XF67. So I'm using my basic airbrush for this, and it's using a 0.35mm needle and nozzle. So you don't need anything too fancy for this stage, but we will be going to our 0.15mm needle and nozzle just for the better details that I want to try and capture later on. So this green might not be as historically accurate, considering it's more of a NATO green, so more of a modern green, but I think for this scale it actually works really nicely. It's not too dark. Now we want to start highlighting certain panels, so I use NATO Green and Flat White, again Tamiya, and I just start spraying within those panels. So you can see that I'm trying to paint about 50% and I'm just hitting the middle of those panels. This is using that smaller needle and nozzle, so you really want to be using this if you can, because your bigger needle and nozzle just won't cut it, or you can try and dry brush these colors on as well. But this is all airbrush work for the color that I'm using for the Lloyd, and if you've got an airbrush, you're really going to save yourself a ton of time here. Then I use NATO Green and Flat White at a 1:1 ratio now. So previously it was a 2:1 ratio, this time it's a 1:1 ratio, and you can see that those panels have really brightened up, but there is dark areas just around the outside of those panels, and that's what you want. So we're panel highlighting here, and we're just capturing the tops of the inner part of the vehicle. I'm not really hitting the wheels as such. I give them a little shot of this, but I'm not really going crazy. I just want a little bit of detail to stand out. Now you can see I've slowed this bit down. I actually made a huge error here. I was putting a bit too much air in and I got a bit of runaway like that. Don't worry, let it dry and you can just airbrush over it with that same color. I didn't do anything differently there, I just reused the same color. Okay, so for the tarp I use khaki, which is XF49, base coat that, and then I use khaki and flat white at again a 2:1 ratio, so we're building up those colors to a lighter color, and I'm hitting the top where the metal bracket would be supporting that tarp, and I'm just getting about 50% of each side, and I'm making sure that I hit those. I don't want to be coating the whole thing in there because we're trying to capture the detail. This is just going to remove any brushwork that we need to do later on, and airbrushing is normally a little bit tidier than brush painting. So khaki and flat white at a 1:1 ratio will be our final highlight for the tarp, and I'm just hitting those lines this time, and you can see that the camera's really not showing much because the paint is so thin and the needle is so small that you're really not going to be able to see it, but trust me, it is definitely getting a lot lighter. Okay, so once we've done that, we want to make sure that we give our vehicle a wash. So I use black wash from MIG. It's an enamel wash. So whenever we're using enamel washes, we want to make sure that we are using a gloss varnish. I use semi-gloss varnish. There really isn't a whole lot of difference. I just find gloss varnish makes your vehicle a bit darker. I find the semi-gloss works a little bit better for me, but it might just be my interpretation of it. So just using an old brush and I'm pin washing that. And then, as I always do, my tidying up process is pretty much the same for any scale. I use a cotton bud. A good technique is to press down on the tip of the cotton bud if you need to get into difficult areas. That was actually recommended to me by a subscriber. I'm surprised I didn't actually think of that prior, but it's a really good trick, especially for vehicles at this scale. So you can see that the airbrush has done most of the work here as well. So now we just got to pick the details. So to start off with, for the wheels, I'm using German grey. That's just going to be painting the rubber of those wheels. I'm also going to be using German grey for any metal. So this vehicle has a shovel and I think it has a few other tools on there. So I'll be using German grey for that. And I'm using a fine brush here. So this is a 2/0 or 0/2. I can't remember which one. I'll put it in the description anyway. But yeah, it's a very fine brush with a very sharp point, which is what you want for this scale. You see that there's a box there that's got some sort of like metal support bracket on there, so I'm painting that as well. And then my wood recipe pretty much is the same for any scale. I use flat earth as my initial base color, and again just taking my time here. But honestly guys, these vehicles, as small as they are and as daunting as it may be, really didn't take too long, and there's very little in terms of the amount of work I actually put into them. But if you let the airbrush do the majority of the work, you are going to save yourself a lot of time and actually makes them stand out very nicely. And then again for the tracks, I use black. So my technique, as I've said already, really hasn't changed for any of the scales I paint. So I use black here, again using a smaller brush, just because I don't want to paint over that German grey of the road wheels, or the wheels, sorry. I want to try and avoid that if I can, and I don't want to get any black on the chassis either. So using a finer brush here, you can go to an older one for the bottom of the tracks where you're not going to be making any mistakes, but for this part I use an old brush, but a small brush. Now I use an acrylic black wash. So this is just a Vallejo wash. I watered it down a touch just to take the sharpness away from the wash, and I'm hitting all those metal areas, not the wheels or the tracks, just the metal objects. So the shovel, any metal tools, that box. And then I'm going with unbar wash. Now this is for the tracks and also the wooden objects, and you can see I'm being really heavy on here. This is just going to dull down that black and sort of weather it quite nicely. I really like this technique. I think it gives a really worn look, and there's very little effort involved when I'm painting this part of a vehicle. Now you've just got to go over what we've already done. So we've got to go back over those colors. So flat earth, we're going back over the wood, but we're not painting the outer edges, we're just painting the middle of these objects now. This is where we start layering / highlighting, if you will. I don't know the correct term, I sort of wing it with terms, but you don't want to be painting the entire thing. So if it's got grooves in there, you want to leave the grooves with those initial dark color that's been washed down, and you just want to hit the tops where those grooves aren't present. And then to highlight wood, I use orange brown, and I just scratch on the very top of the surface, pick out like the handle, maybe the middle part of the shovel, and leave the two outer parts. So this is just to give the shovel a bit more definition, especially at this scale. It's going to be hard to see unless you get real close. So just highlighting with brighter colors really helps with drawing the eye to that part of the object, or that object. And you can see here I'm just adding a dot in the middle of this box between those metal brackets. And then for the metal, the equation is exactly the same. German grey over those metal objects. I'm not touching the wheels here, I'm just hitting the metal tools and the part of the box. And then for metal, I like to go with a silver, so I use base lead belcher from Citadel. But you can use any sort of medium silver. What I mean by medium is not one that's super bright, sort of meet in the middle. So you don't want one that's super dark, but you don't want one that's super light. So base lead belcher works for me, and I just highlight all those metal objects using that. So for the crate, I just add a line straight down the middle and I scratch it in. Now for the tracks, I dry brush them with flat brown. this will give a really worn looking track. It gives it a rusty look, and there is absolutely no effort involved with this. So all I've done is black unbar wash and then a brown dry brush, and you've got yourself an amazing looking track with little to no effort. If you wanted to add in a little bit more detail to that, you could dry brush very lightly some of that base lead belcher just on the tips of the tracks, but it's really not necessary. So now I want to add some scratches and some more. I want to pick out those panel lines. So I use German Camo Beige World War II, and you can see that I'm just hitting the rivets. So yes, this 12mm model has rivets, and I'm just picking out the details. I'm adding scratches on the corners where it perhaps is bashed into a few things. I'll add scratches just along the tops of boxes where there'd be some wear where you're grabbing it all the time and putting equipment in and out of those boxes where they're going to get beat up. And then I want to add in a scratch from like a tree or going by a bush, so just a nice little scratch. And you can do it across two panels, you can do it different angles, you can do two lines running together or opposite, whatever you want to do. And then I want to hit certain parts of those scratches with German Camo Black Brown. Now this is a very light step, and you just want to hit the areas that have maybe got a bit more of that German Camo Beige. And this is just going to make the eye believe that the metal part of that object is poking through. So the German Camo Beige is a light scratch, you've just scratched the paint surface. The German Camo Dark Brown is the bare metal that it's gone through. So you can see here I'm just adding a little line next to that scratch mark near the Allied star there. Now we want to grow in our crewmen. So this vehicle has 3 squares, and that's where they sit. So I'm just gluing in my driver. And then we are done. So no figure painting today in terms of the actual infantry, but we have got the vehicle done. So huge thanks goes out to Steve for sending me these. For my eagle-eyed viewers, in the future you will see these hopefully on their website or wherever they decide to promote these, because these are going to be going on a trip back to the UK at some point. But yeah, so these are all but done, and I will be sending these off. So I had a really good time painting these. 12mm is actually a lot more fun than I thought it would be, and the fact that you get multiple options, you get crew, so these actually come with some more crew as well. They're really cool. So if you're new to 12mm or you just wanted to see how I painted these, definitely go check out Victrix Limited and their 12mm range. I know it's definitely getting bigger as well, so keep an eye on that. But if you're not into 12mm and you want to paint 15, 20 or 28, 6mm, whatever you want to do, these paints that I used here will work for all of those. So this technique, especially for painting British late war vehicles, will work really nicely. But other than that, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. And if you're an existing member, thank you so much for your support. Other than that, guys, I will catch you next time. Thank you.